And welcome back to another podcast with Mr. Hagan. On this podcast, we're going to continue working with monopoly numbers. And we did monopoly calculations on a previous podcast. What we're going to look at now is graphing these numbers. So what we're going to do, we want to graph the following numbers. And here's how we're going to do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a monopoly graph. And on the horizontal axis, we're going to graph the quantity of the good that the monopoly produces. And that could be anywhere from 0 to 10. Okay, so you would go through and you would graph that 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and graph quantity on the horizontal. On the vertical axis, and I would try doing this on a piece of graph paper, on the vertical axis, we would go from 0 to 100, and this is all going to be measured in dollars. We would go from 0 to 100. And we're going to graph the following items. We would graph here's the output. So this output right here, that's my Q. That's going to get graphed on the horizontal axis. Everything else is going to go on the vertical. And that would be the price. So you would graph the price on here. And I'm going to show you a picture of this here in a moment. We're going to graph the price. We're going to graph the average total cost. Graph the average total cost. And then the marginal revenue and the marginal cost. So we're going to have 4 different lines on this graph. We're going to have the price, which we'll see is essentially going to be the demand curve, the marginal revenue, the average total cost, and the marginal cost. Those will be the 4 items on the graph. So if you want to try to graph that yourself, you could pause me right now and go ahead and do it. And then start this video back up, and then I will show you what the graph looks like and talk a little bit about what it means. All right, so maybe you got a chance to create the graph for this. If not, that's fine. Here's what the graph would look like. This first line right here, this is the price, or what I'm going to call the demand curve, because the reason why I call this demand curve is it shows the quantity, which is down here on the horizontal axis, for all the different possible prices. And when you put price and quantity together, you're going to get a demand curve. So that's like my demand curve. And the demand curve really is some other things as well. The demand curve is also going to be the average revenue. And it's also going to be, as I just said, it's also going to be the price. So the demand curve is really 3 things at once. And then, of course, we have the marginal cost curve that slopes down, hits a minimum, and rises, just like any other marginal cost curve. And the average total cost curve is going to decrease, hit a minimum right where it intersects marginal cost. That's always has to be the case. And then the average total cost will begin to rise again. So that's the average total cost curve. And then finally, we have the marginal cost curve. Now, here's a big difference from pure competition. Did I say marginal cost? If I did, I meant to say marginal revenue. This is the marginal revenue curve. And the marginal revenue curve has separated from the demand curve. And so this is a lot different than pure competition. In pure competition, we could say this. In pure competition, demand was equal to price, was equal to average revenue, was equal to marginal revenue. They were all the same thing. But that's not true in monopoly. In monopoly, we could say, when we're in a monopoly situation, demand equals price equals average revenue, but the marginal revenue is now separated from the rest of it. The marginal revenue is now separated. And on some future videos, I'll talk about why. For now, we're just going to trust the numbers that we did. I'll talk about what's going on a future video. So let's talk about the first thing that we always do. The first thing that we always do with these graphs is we want to go look at where the firm would produce. And we know that the firm will produce where the marginal revenue equals the marginal cost, because that's the point of profit maximization. We already know that. So let's see. Here's my marginal cost curve. Here's my marginal revenue curve. And so profit maximization will happen right here, where the marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost. Now, I want to say really clearly that where the marginal revenue equals the marginal cost, that's used to figure out the level of production, which in this case is going to be 6. But then that's it. It doesn't do anything. Let me just back that up a little bit. It doesn't do anything after that. So the marginal revenue, marginal cost determines the level of production, and then I can kind of get tunnel vision right here and just focus on that level of production. But after that, marginal revenue, marginal cost, we don't do anything with them. Those curves we don't pay attention to anymore, okay? Marginal revenue and marginal cost, we only put those on the graph to find the level of production that will maximize profits. Now, once we do that, I am interested in graphing two things. I am interested in graphing the average revenue, which is here off the demand curve. So here's where we hit the demand curve. If we produce, okay, marginal revenue, marginal cost said to produce at 6 units. That will be the level of output that will maximize profits. And then we come up to the demand curve and over, and that will be the average revenue. That will be the average revenue. It will also be the price, because average revenue and price must be equal to each other. So the average revenue will be $75 per unit. And then the average total cost, if we're producing at 6 units, we come up to the average total cost curve. That's right here. Here's average total cost. We come up to the average total cost curve and come across. And that's going to give me my average total cost if we produce at 6 units of production, which is going to be, I think it's $33.33. That's my average total cost. And let's go back and check those numbers on the graph. We can go check those numbers on the graph. If we come back here to the graph, if we produce at 6 units, we can find, here's the price right there, which is the average revenue is 75, and then my average total cost, here it is, my average total cost is $33.33 if we produce at 6 units. If we produce at 6 units. Okay, let's go back to the graph. So let's find the different areas on our graph. We know that if we take the average revenue, which is 75, and multiply it by the level of output, that will give us the total revenue. Okay, so total revenue is equal to the average revenue, or the price, times quantity, the level of output. Well, that in this case is going to be 75 times 6, which is going to create the area of this rectangle. 75 times 6. 6 units on the horizontal for quantity, 75 units on the vertical axis for the average revenue. So the total revenue is going to be the area of this box, which is equal to 75 times 6, which is going to give us a total revenue of $450 if we produce at 6 units. What about the total cost? The total cost is going to be at 6 units of production. We go up to the average total cost, which is right here, and across. That's to my average total cost, which is $33.33 per unit, and complete this rectangle. And the area of that rectangle will be our total cost. That's be the area of that rectangle is equal to our total cost. Why? Because remember, the total cost is equal to the average total cost multiplied by the level of output. Well, the level of output was 6. The average total cost is $33.33. So if we multiply that together, let's see, that's going to be a total cost of $200. Let's go check our numbers and make sure that we are correct. Let's go check those numbers. If we produce at 6 units, let's see, there it is. My total revenue is going to be $450 if we produce at 6. And let's see, my total cost is going to be $200 if we're at 6 units of production. So our numbers are correct. Okay, now we want to find, what we really want to find is our profit. Well, our profit is going to be in between. So it's going to be the total revenue, which is going to be this whole area, minus the total cost, which is going to be this area right here. Let me say that again. Total revenue is the big red area. That's my total revenue, minus my total cost, which is the blue area, which is 450 minus 200, gives me my profit, which is equal to $250. So this area in here is going to be the profit for the monopolist. That's the profit for the monopolist. Now that graph is kind of ugly. There's a lot of stuff going on here. So we're gonna try doing this without the numbers on some future videos. Try to make it look a little bit cleaner. But let's just say two things very quickly before we're done here. And those two things are this. Okay, first of all, actually, before I say those two things, let me back up and let's just look at our numbers one more time. If we produce at 6, this will be my average revenue, total cost, average total cost, and then look, here's that profit number that we just saw, 250. And by the way, notice that that's the point of profit maximization, which we knew because that's where the marginal cost was equal to the marginal revenue. That's the point of profit maximization, and that happens right here, profit maximization, okay, at 250. Now, let's say two things about the monopolist. Two huge advantages for the monopolist. Advantage number one is they get to charge a price above the marginal revenue. Pure competition, purely competitive firms don't get to do so. Their marginal revenue will be equal to the price, but not for a monopolist. They get to choose a price above their marginal revenue all the way up here to the demand curve. They get to charge a price above their marginal revenue all the way up on the demand curve. So that's advantage number one. Advantage number two is the monopolist enjoys this economic profit right here. They enjoy this economic profit, and they get to keep enjoying that economic profit. Why? They get to keep enjoying it because nobody can come into the market and compete against them, because remember, there's some kind of barrier to entry that is preventing competition. Okay? If nobody can enter the market because there's barriers to entry, then no other competitors would love to come in and compete because all this economic profit that this firm is making. Other firms would love to come in, but they can't because there's some kind of barrier to entry that is keeping them out. And as a result of that, this firm gets to continue making those economic profits. That's the advantage to the monopolist. We will talk on a later video, however, that this creates all kinds of inefficiencies for society. All right, so there's the our first try at drawing a monopoly graph. We'll draw some more monopoly graphs on some future videos. Thanks for joining me. This has been Mr. Hagan. We'll see you on the next Econ Podcast.